Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome our distinguished guests here on the site of the World of Hunting and Nature exhibition, and of course, those who are following us online. Thank you very much for that. Welcome to the stage of the World Conservation Forum. My name is Mickey, here is Nemo. Anyway, we both will be your host for today. Last time, he just vomited to the stage during his introduction, so I think it will be pretty easy to improve our performance this time. The agenda for today is about wildlife management, poaching, sustainable conservation, advanced urban gardening, special types of ammunition, and finally, the mysterious connection between art and conservation. So it's definitely worth your time here on site, and it's worth your time following us online either. Now, it is time to present our first guest, Mr. David Morales-Hidalgo, the Forestry Officer of FAO, who will enrich our knowledge about wildlife habitat assessment using satellite imagery. Enjoy.
Thank you, Mike. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you today. I hope you can enjoy the presentation today. They asked me to talk about wildlife habitat assessment using remote sensing. Then I will try to introduce this topic. It's a little bit technical in somehow, but I will try to make it not so complicated in order that you can enjoy the presentation. You know, when we talk about wildlife management, we talk about this is the management process influencing interaction among or between the wildlife and its habitats and people and achieve predefined impacts. We mean there are three major components on this management that we want to implement. And of course, when we try to do wildlife management, I have to say, I will not go into detail of this process because you will have other presenters that will talk in more detail about wildlife management. But just to introduce the topic, we have some management practices that we have to implement. Some of them, for example, we can use sustainable forest management. Sometimes we work in the edge control of the habitats. We as well try to work with the hunting process, wildlife management areas, and among others. There are several other management practices that we can implement. Of course, to do or to take in consideration those practices, we need to have or take in consideration some principles, like the ecological principle, like carrying the capacity, disturbance and succession, and environmental conditions. We need to take those in consideration. In order to come with these practices and then accomplish these principles, we need to have information. You know that for any kind of management that we want to implement, we need to have the information, we need to know what we have in order to have the management. Okay, I work with the FAO as a forestry officer in Rome, dealing with forest monitoring and forest monitoring at national level. And most of the information we try to compile or we try to promote national forest monitoring systems at the level of the country, but as well we work with our member countries to improve data at the regional or even local level. When we try to promote this kind of information, you know, for the national forest monitoring system, we try to focus on 7 major areas of focus. One is, for example, the extent of the forest resources. We need to know how much do we have, how much forest we have, what we have in the forest. We as well work or try to find out the forest biological diversity that we have in these habitats. We try to find out the forest health, and the diversity that we have in those areas, as well the productive functions of the forest resources, protective functions of forest resources, as well is not only thinking in terms of timber, but as well in other non-wood forest products or other environmental services. We try as well to focus on the social economic functions of the forest and some legal policy and institutional framework. This is more or less the framework where we try to focus the information we compile. That is as well important for the assessment of the habitats for the wildlife management. Normally, what we try to promote with the data collection, we have to keep in mind that there are two main sources of information. One is the data that you can collect in the field. You go to the terrain, you go to the forest, and then you can see what is there. You can measure the trees, you can see what the species is. For example, you are interested in the wildlife, you can as well try to find out what kind of wildlife is there, know about the quantity of the wildlife you have. There are different options, there are different procedures that you can track the wildlife. Then you have as well the surveys. You can go to the towns or households close to the habitats or the forests that you are looking for, and try to get some information. Some surveys, socioeconomical surveys for collecting some information. On the other hand, you have as well information related with remote sensing information. It's information that you can collect, but not in the field, but outside the field, and even outside the planet, From this information is where I would like to go in more deep today. Okay, we have what we call remote sensing, the raw data. In this, we have different types of information as a remote sensing. We have satellite imagery, or we have aerial photograph, we have the radar image, we have LiDAR, airborne, drones, and terrestrial sensors. Probably you already know some of them, probably some others are more specific, like for example the radar imagery, that this is a little bit complicated, but this helps us a lot because in areas where there are too many clouds, the normal imagery is not working, but the radar can go through the clouds. In case, for example, of LiDAR or multispectral imagery, you can have, for example, information regarding even the height of the trees. You can have, for example, some information about the size of the forest, the stands or the trees, and sometimes can help as well to track the wildlife. There are some cameras that you can set up in the field, like a sampling plot, and when any animal or wildlife pass by, this camera have, movement sensors, and they shot a picture, and then they get. Even it can be in the night because they have as well infrared lights. In terms of resolution, what we can resolution is the minimal area that we can see. For example, we have, I don't know if you can see the picture over there. This is a very nice image where you can see even the palms, and then if you want, you can even count each of this palm. In some cases, if you want to track elephants or big mammals, it's even easy to do it. sometimes there are other imagery that capture, for example, flowers of the forest, and then you can make identification of different species in the forest. Then if you go, normally the most useful or the most, not useful, the more known is the air photos that were used long time. But now they have as well the technology with LiDAR, where you can have as well different options to make the analysis with this kind of sensors. And the remote sensing that gives you a really a broader resolution of the information. But as well, this remote sensing or this satellite imagery have different options that you can play to get information. Now, in the time I was in the university, it was a long time ago, it was so complicated to get access to this kind of resources. It was expensive, really expensive, and then the computers were not really easy to manage the information. Today, things are changing. You will see that now there are a lot of information that is free available. You know, for example, the 1 kilometer, 500 meter, and 30 meter resolution. You can have information even per hour, and others in 5 days, you know, per week. You have one of those sensors coming and take some pictures from the space. There are others like 3, 5, or even less resolution, where you need to have, you know, your own ways to do it. You can have to pay, or you have to have, nowadays really popular, the drones. You can have your own drone and have as well this kind of imagery. And you have these options. The problem with this is, you know, every time we solve something, something is coming. Now we have too much information. There is too much. Then it's even not possible to store all the information in your computer. You will need huge computer. Then now what we have now is the cloud. You know, everything now is in the cloud. Okay, just to give you an idea, the most common sensors that we have, and from where, you know, from which year they started. For example, the oldest is the Landsat 5. It started in the 80s. And now, those days, we have more and more sensors. But what we can get from this imagery, what we can, you know, if we have this information there in the cloud, what we can extract from there. There are several processes, there are several procedures to get information, but some of them related with the assessment of the wildlife habitat that I can mention, perhaps are some direct measurements like tree cover or vegetation index, the height of the vegetation, phenology, fraction of photosynthetic active radiation, or in case that we want or we are interested as well in fires or wildfires, we can get as well assessment of the burned areas. From these direct measurements, we can have other indirect measurements, like, for example, land cover, land use areas, biomass and carbon stocks, forest type, species, communities, and the normalized difference vegetation index, just to mention some of them. Of course, as I mentioned, there are several other options. This is just to show you, in terms of the global level, some of the products that you can have. In this case, for example, this is a land cover land use map. Then you can see how the different land uses is somehow described. Here, for example, this is a series of analysis of deforestation areas, where there is a time series And you can see, like a small video, how these areas are happening. This is a picture taken from Google Earth, where you can even notice the health of some wildlife in somewhere. Here's an example of, for example, of forest fires. There is an analysis, and then you can easily check where the forest fire were recorded at that time using remote sensing. And of course, this is affecting the wildlife that we want to manage. Okay, I mentioned before, we have the resource, we have now the information. Now I mentioned as well that we have the cloud where we can do some of those analysis. But the other question is, how can we do it? Of course, there are several commercial softwares where you can have and make the different analysis you require. But from FAO side, we have been working with other partners to develop different tools in open source software that you can download, learn how to use it, and then have it without additional cost. I will focus today in the one that's called CPAL, but of course you have the Collect Earth application and the AirMat that perhaps in other opportunity I can mention about that. Okay, what is CPAL? CPAL is a cloud platform for Earth observation data and access, processing, and monitoring. As I mentioned before, there are a lot of information, of data out there, but we need to have the way to do it, or to access, and then how to process. And then CPAL will be, or is one option. CPAL is a cloud platform for accessing, processing, and analyzing geospatial data for land monitoring, or in this case, habitat assessment, wildlife habitat assessment. CPAL is free and open to anyone. Anyone can register and access. All what you need is to have some internet connection to access CPAL on the website. With CPAL, you have different features that you can use, process the geodata or access the data, then do whatever analysis you want. This platform has been developed with the support of different donors and stakeholders and partners that have been working with us, like European Commission, NASA, European Agency, et cetera, private companies as well, universities, and then now this is available for anyone that want to use it. Currently, we have more than 7,000 users in 160 countries. And I think, I mentioned before that there is a lot of information, and sometimes we don't use it. And this information is somehow in our hands, because you can access even by your phone. With CPAL, you can have access to this information using even your mobile device. You can search and process satellite imagery directly in the cloud. That means that you don't need to have a really robust computer to do the analysis. You have access to what the people call supercomputers. That is a really big computer that can be accessible through the software in the cloud to make the different analysis you want to perform. You can store and access data or your data, and even analyze data using predefined processing chains that you want to define. We have been working in different countries trying to promote this national forest monitoring system, and we want to continue with this. One of the nice things as well that this platform offered you is that you can have imagery without clouds. That is sometimes difficult if you are thinking in terms of using this remote sensing imagery, because there are a lot of clouds always. But with the process, you can have, like in this case, a shot of all the glove, the tropical glove, without any cloud. Then you can see what is behind all the clouds. Okay, just to summarize, CPAL is free, open source, and is accessible to anyone. It's a data production platform. It's a collaborative platform and targets several user groups. But as I mentioned before, it can be a really good tool for wildlife management. You can, as well, as I mentioned before, use process data using some different sources, like Google Earth Engine, that this is a really strong tool to make the analysis of the remote sensing information. But sometimes you need some kind of expertise to use it. But through our tool, the CPAL, you can have access and use it in a user-friendly way. Okay, you can. The nice thing is you can as well do different time series analysis. As you saw, the Landsat 5 started in the 80s, and then there were several years where you have some different information. Then with the tool, you can go even check where you live, where your house is located, and see in a historical way how the changes around your house have been happening during the last years. Even if your house was built last year, you can see what was before of the build your house. One of the other options that we provide is that you can use your own codes to do the analysis. Then there are some options where you can access predefined applications like R, like Python and Morpheo tools, and others to make different kind of analysis. Then, for example, you are working with wildlife and then you want to make different fragmentation analysis or whatever kind of analysis you want, you can use these tools and use the information that you have and produce what you need. I give you some links where you can have or you can access more information. Thank you. I think you don't get sleep. I hope you enjoy the presentation, and I am open here for any other question that you want to have. You might have.
Thank you, Mr. Morales.